This is Luke Paulson, the Catholic Conservative, and welcome to the news of the week for October 26th, 2024. And if you enjoy these videos, do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. Cackling Kamala's allies. A recent undercover investigation by OMG has exposed more of the bias inside major tech companies. In a series of videos, Facebook employees inadvertently admitted to some concerning practices. First, they revealed that any content critical of Cackling Kamala is automatically downplayed on the publisher. Anything that questions her policies, performance, or character is being suppressed behind the scenes. Second, the employee admitted that questionable conservative content is swiftly flagged and sent for fact-checking by higher-ups. We all know what that means. Biased fact-checkers who lean left are scrutinizing anything that challenges their narrative. Third, the employee flat-out said that they know that the publisher has a liberal bias, but no one in leadership seems to care. When the people who control information admit that they are intentionally tilting the scales, we have a problem. I do not like being fact-checked, but when it is by people who believe men can get pregnant, that is when I know I am standing on the right side of history. Even the mainstream media, the fake news, is beginning to acknowledge that Cackling Kamala is slipping in the polls. No amount of censorship can hide the fact that the American people are waking up to the truth. While social media publishers may be bending over backward to protect Cackling Kamala's image, it is not enough to hide the cracks in her persona. The real Cackling Kamala is being exposed, and not just by tech insiders, but by her own actions. She lost her joy. Cackling Kamala once carried the title President of Joy.
We need Kamala Harris, the President of Joy.
But it is hard to see what is joyful about her tenure. As inflation continues to squeeze Americans, and the southern border remains a sieve for illegals, Cackling Kamala's joyful persona has all but vanished. Recently, she was furiously yelling that Donald Trump
should never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States. Never again. Never again. Never again.
This is not the composed, joyful leader she claims to be. This is someone who is clearly becoming unhinged under the pressure. For someone who touted optimism and unity, Cackling Kamala seems more focused on blame and division these days. It is no secret that she and her party have been doing everything that they can to sideline President Trump. Yet, despite their best efforts, President Trump is still standing, much to her frustration. Maybe that is why her so-called joy has disappeared. As long as President Trump is still in the picture, Cackling Kamala's grip on power looks increasingly fragile. As she becomes increasingly unhinged, the tensions surrounding this administration are not just limited to politics. They have escalated to something far more dangerous. Even the safety of those who oppose her is being threatened. The bounty has not gone away. The threat against President Trump's life is growing, and shockingly, it does not seem to be taken as seriously as it should. This week marked the third recorded assassination attempt on President Trump. This time it took place in California's Coachella Valley, and according to local authorities, they managed to stop the would-be assassin in time. However, federal authorities are disputing this. What is most disturbing is that after the second attempt, the shooter's manifesto was released to the public, revealing a bounty on President Trump's life. This should have been a national wake-up call. Yet, instead of calming the rhetoric, liberals have only ramped it up, openly calling for more resistance against President Trump. It is frightening to think that despite all of this, the authorities have been surprisingly lax in their response. At this point, it feels like they're turning a blind eye to the danger. Conservatives have been asking for cooler heads to prevail, but the escalating language from the left is making things worse. Despite the grave danger facing President Trump, Cackling Kamala continues to focus on her own image, desperate to appear relatable. But unlike President Trump, who is willing to roll up his sleeves and get to work, Cackling Kamala's attempts at connecting with everyday Americans have fallen flat. Working at McDonald's, Cackling Kamala loves to talk about her middle-class roots, but the reality is much different. She often says she came from a humble background, but the truth is, growing up, her family was wealthy. She even claims that she worked at McDonald's growing up. But just like her middle-class story, this is probably false. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, a billionaire businessman, actually took the time to work at a McDonald's this past weekend. Yes, you heard that right. President Trump donned an apron and served food to everyday Americans. And the people loved it.
I'm loving it.
President Trump gets it. He understands what it means to work hard, to earn a living, and to connect with ordinary Americans. The fake news is scratching their heads, not understanding why President Trump would do this. But the answer is simple. President Trump knows the value of hard work and connecting with the people. He is not out of touch like Cackling Kamala, who cannot even remember her own upbringing without spinning a web of lies. At the same time this event was taking place, it was revealed that there was a massive E. coli outbreak, linked to contaminated beef at several McDonald's locations.
Coincidence? I think not!
This outbreak seems all too convenient for Democrats, as it quickly became a headline right after President Trump's appearance. While Cackling Kamala tries and fails to connect with voters through false stories, her ongoing identity crisis only adds to the confusion. Just when you think she cannot get any more out of touch, she changes accents once again. Now she is Jamaican. Cackling Kamala's identity shifts as often as her accents. For most of her career, she has proudly identified as Indian, the first Indian American elected to California's Senate. Then when it suited her politically, she became black, even adopting an accent, speaking as though she were from a different background entirely. Next came a fake Southern accent during campaign stops, further confusing the narrative of who Cackling Kamala really is. And now in a recent interview with Mockingbird asset Stephen Colbert, Cackling Kamala is suddenly Jamaican. The inconsistency is staggering. And let us not forget the irony. Her ancestors were slave owners in that part of the world. What accent will she unveil next? Maybe she will attempt Chinese or Russian for international relations.
Only Poppins would know.
Or perhaps she will go all in on a mime routine, staying silent because her words are as inconsistent as her shifting identities.
One can only hope.
However, an accent is only one part of her persona. The other part is a carefully controlled media. Scripted town hall. We have seen Brandon admit that he was given a pre-approved list of reporters to call on during press conferences. Now it seems that Cackling Kamala has the same issue. At her most recent town hall, she was given pre-approved questions from pre-approved people. This goes against the very purpose of a town hall, which is meant to engage with unscripted public concerns. Her handlers are also pointing out who she should take questions from at other events. It is clear why she only participates in shows that openly support her. This also explains why her team abruptly cut her interview with Brett Baer short. As we witness the careful scripting of Cackling Kamala's public appearances, it becomes clear why unfiltered, genuine interactions are increasingly rare at her events. And when unexpected voices do manage to slip in, it becomes painfully obvious how much control her team needs to maintain. The wrong rally. Just a few decades ago, shouting "Jesus is Lord" would have received cheers from almost any crowd. At Cackling Kamala's recent pro-murder rally, however, such a statement was met with ridicule. When someone in the crowd shouted this phrase, he was told he was at the wrong rally. It is hard to understand why this would be controversial, unless you think about it. If Jesus is Lord, that means that the president is not. And when your event is centered around promoting infanticide, mentioning the Christ poses a serious challenge to your agenda. As freedom of speech becomes increasingly challenged at public events, the intolerance of faith-based messages is growing. And in some parts of the world, even praying can now land you in prison. Silently praying is now a crime. In some parts of the world, even silently praying near an abortion mill is now illegal. A veteran was recently confronted by police while praying outside a designated buffer zone. He was standing behind a tree and did not even have his hands folded in prayer. The officers inquired about the nature of his prayer. He was then arrested for the act of praying. Although Britain does not have the same freedoms of speech and religion as the United States, this serves as a warning. The erosion of these rights will not stop at their borders. When this comes to America, I will be able to say,
"'Twas never a matter of if, only when."
As these troubling developments unfold overseas, it serves as a stark reminder that our own rights must be actively defended. Freedom, once lost, is incredibly hard to regain. And yet another Western country has just lost a major freedom, arrested over hurt feelings. In Australia, a proposed law could send people to prison for 5 years over so-called hate speech.
Fun fact, hate speech has never been defined by a court of law.
This law extends to private conversations, even those held in one's own home. Imagine chatting with your in-laws, and because they disagree with your opinion, you could be arrested. Do not be fooled into thinking this law will only target dangerous speech. If you believe that,
I got some oceanfront property and
Remember how extreme Australia became during the pandemic?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Expect things to get much worse very quickly. As freedoms rapidly erode in places like Australia, restrictions on basic rights such as speech and assembly are tightening worldwide. But true freedom only exists in Christ Jesus. Witches cannot touch him. Back in 2016, a group of witches attempted to cast a curse on Donald Trump. To be clear, they used their demonic forces in an attempt to curse him. Technically, they called it a binding spell, but in essence, it was a curse. Now, years later, these witches are at it again. However, this time they are admitting that their efforts are failing. They confess that there is something protecting him from their magic. The only force that can stand against such evil is Christ Jesus. Interestingly, after President Trump was shot, there was a symbolic detail. There was blood on his earlobe. He touched it with his hand, and then touched his foot. Under Levitical law, this marks the process of purification. It is clear that President Trump is experiencing divine protection. As the spiritual war rages on, the protection surrounding President Trump becomes even more evident. While witches fail to touch him, Democrats keep trying. Lock him up. At a recent event for his chosen successor, Brandon made an intriguing statement. "We gotta lock him up." Afterward, Brandon tried to clarify his statement. He claimed that he meant it politically. However, his original intent was quite clear. Interestingly, when "lock her up" was chanted about Hillary Clinton in 2016, the media called it a dangerous dog whistle. Now that the chant is aimed at Trump, the same outrage is nowhere to be found. But this is not the only tactic from 2016 making a comeback. The familiar narrative of Russiagate has once again been dusted off. Russiagate returns. Several former members of President Trump's staff and advisors are reviving the old Russiagate story. They have begun telling the media that President Trump not only admired Adolf Hitler, but he also wanted to model America after Nazi Germany. This claim is being made about one of the most pro-Jewish presidents since Truman. Despite these accusations, actual Nazis in America have not endorsed Donald Trump. However, many Jewish Americans continue to show their support for him. This accusation is the October surprise meant to win the election for Cackling Kamala. But voters should not be swayed by these recycled stories. As we brace for the final weeks before the election, it is clear that old tactics are being deployed once again. But just as in 2016 and 2020, make sure to go out and vote for Donald Trump. Maybe I'm just blowing smoke. Maybe I'm completely off my rocker, but that is just my opinion. And do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. But before you go, on the left I have last week's video, but you may also enjoy the video on the right.